Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's AIM webinar, Solving Modern Supply Chain Challenges with RFID and Hybrid Scanning. First, before we get into today's topic, I wanted to share a little bit about AIM. AIM is the Industry Association for Automatic Identification and Data Capture Technologies. We serve as a hub for quality resources covering all types of barcode, RFID, and mobile computing information. We also foster new auto ID innovations that stimulate market growth. We encourage you to get involved. If you would like additional information, you can reach out to us at info@aimglobal.org. And then also wanted to go over AIM's antitrust policy. It is the policy of AIM to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activity shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Philip.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Philip Heritis. I'm with Datalogic here in the United States. And today we are going to talk to you about one of the hybrid solutions that we've deployed at a customer where they wanted to go from scanning standard UPCs and integrating RFID into their point of sale process. So let me share the screen. As you can tell by the slide, that customer is Lowe's. For those, I'm sure everyone here in the United States and abroad is probably familiar. Lowe's is a very large do-it-yourself store. They have approximately 1,700 locations spread around North America, and they're one of the largest in that business, next to Home Depot and others, so that they're typically in that space. One of the things that Lowe's came to us about was, they wanted to come up with a solution that could be hybrid, that they could integrate into their existing point-of-sale systems to basically migrate from not only scanning traditional GS1 UPC barcodes, but also integrating the ability to scan EPC RFID tags. And the big question is, why would Lowe's need to do that, or any retailer need to do that? So obviously the big main reasons, right, is reduce shrinkage, right, and loss prevention. And then what ties into that, one of the biggest issues that can occur at the point of sale inside of retail is when, say, a customer, right, would take a UPC sticker off of one product that's at a lower cost and put it onto a product that sells for a higher cost. So as you can kind of see there in the pictures, right, we show our new PowerScan RFID 9600. It has the capability to not only scan the standard, you see it scanning a UPC there, but if you're using high value items such as a power drill, a battery, or some sort of other powered equipment that's going to have a much higher cost and more apt to the theft and shrink, right now we have the ability to integrate RFID tags. So with a single scan, you're scanning, or the customer scanning that UPC, and at the same time, inside the package of the box, they're reading the EPC and they're doing real-time verification or validation with one single scan. Now, also, the solution allows you to even take it a step further. So in that single scan, you can also capture a full color image of the process. So you know what's being scanned, when it's being scanned, and what is being proposed onto the screen. So it's a great, great, great solution to allow supply chain and customers to integrate RFID into their use cases. And there's a lot of products now. It's not just limited to, say, high value items. So like here on my desk, for example, and if you can kind of see it on the screen. So I use this one as an example, but this is a typical retail tag with a UPC. And you look inside of it, and it's kind of hard to see. You see the EPC underneath it. And this is actually one of Target brand stores items, for example. It's a $12 item. So at the point of manufacturer, a lot of stores or retailers are now integrating EPC tags even into their branded items, low cost items. In addition to the shrink and loss prevention, obviously they can use it for inventory and product tracking and receiving and other applications. So it's really, really provides a lot of flexibility for integrating and migrating into RFID into those use cases and point of sale and inventory tracking.
So Philip, are you telling me that I can no longer go get my DeWalt drills for the price of a Ryobi?
That is correct, Sam, right? So if you happen to go into a Lowe's and you took that UPC off that $99 Ryobi and you wanted to put it on a $599 DeWalt, when that PowerScan scans that UPC, it's going to verify that there's a mismatch between the UPC that's stuck on the box to the RFID inlay that's stuck inside of the box. So that will obviously suspend the sale and have the ability to contact the store associates. And, we always assume on the side customers are being honest, but obviously the goal is, again, to prevent shrink and have that loss prevention.
Yeah, and I imagine, Lowe's obviously seems like a really kind of center of the plate use case for this because there are, as we just highlighted, some pretty big price differences between similar items. But I imagine this is applicable to a lot of different retailers. I mean, I think of clothing, right? Getting the cheap pair of jeans, the tag off the cheap pair of jeans and trying to get the designer jeans, shoes, really, anything. Or people may even be trying to just save a couple dollars. Hey, I want to get this, save $5 off this item. If they think it's as easy as switching a tag, I imagine it's a pretty prevalent problem.
Oh, yes, most definitely. In fact, apparel's probably been leading the charge, high value apparel for the past several years, but now we're moving into, more expensive items, durable items, do-it-yourself items. And then I even mentioned that a lot of the lower cost manufacturing, you think of someone like Hanes, right, that makes undergarments, low cost items. Now every product that comes from Hanes brands does have that RFID inlay in it. So again, it gives a lot more flexibility beyond, even some of the high value assets. And then probably one of the ones that's also popular that we're seeing an uptick on is also counterfeit items. So if you're buying a name brand high-end item, you want to verify that, it's coming from whether it's, a Gucci of the world or someone, a Prada, you pick your brand of choice. You want to make sure that you're getting legitimate products and not products from a third party from another country, right? That's outside the typical supply chain process.
Yeah, I know whenever I buy my Gucci handbags, I'm very, very particular and make sure that they're legit. Well, and let me verify one other thing with this use case as well. So, I mean, you really highlighted that this is a dual scanning application. So there's still a barcode involved, and then there's a D tag. So if somebody is being unscrupulous and they decide to switch the tags, I imagine you're also going to be able to not just make sure that the right item is scanned at the checkout, but you're going to know that that switch happened because you're still asking them to scan the barcode, but the RFID tag is going to read different. Now somebody could step in and know that something funny is going on here.
That's correct. And then if you add the layer of a visual digital color image right at the point of scan, you will have a record in it. And right, loss prevention and theft can happen both on the consumer side and the store associate side. So you can utilize that technology not only to keep your customers honest, but also keep your store associates honest as well, especially if they know they're doing that verification and you're taking a digital color image of the process.
Very, very cool.
Yeah. So, and here's just kind of what the product looks like, right? It looks like a traditional point of sale scanner. You can have with a keyboard, without a keyboard, with a display. Basically, there's a multicolor LED on it, so if it's by the color of the LED, if it's scanning when it's scanning the barcode, when it's scanning the EPC tag, and then also when it's taking a digital image. So there is a visual feedback capability even on the non-display items with just in the form of the LED. So it's a great product. It would integrate just like any point of sale scanner would. Obviously, you would need that software piece to kind of do that real-time EPC, UPC validation. But organizations such as Lowe's and others are already integrating that functionality both now and in the future. So let's talk about some questions. Sam, we had some from the audience I know that kind of already sent out, and we can kind of get into some of the specifics on, how and where and why to use this product.
Yeah, I think I'm going to turn it over to Bethany. I know she had some questions we wanted to go over first, and I'll let you go ahead and tee that up, Bethany.
All right, so we're going to get into some panel questions now, and then we will answer some of the audience questions at the end of the webinar here. But starting with the panel questions, what is the most interesting RFID use case you have worked on?
I have worked with some organizations where they're using passive tags on the ears of livestock. So we do have the capability. That's one example of a unique use case where you put an ear tag on cattle, on sheep, items, basically livestock on ranches, and you can track, their movement from point A to point B, from one field to another field to a barn, if it's meat processing, right, into the processing plants, right, for food supply. So it gives you the availability to kind of track that livestock. Also, if an animal's sick, right, and it goes into a veterinarian area, you have the ability to track, which animals are sick or quarantined or are receiving veterinarian services. So it's a kind of a really unique use case on how to use RFID.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I haven't done anything with livestock, but that sounds like a really, really interesting project. But we're seeing, obviously, tracking products is a really core use case for RFID, but we're also seeing a lot of RFID adoption in the manufacturing space. So I think work in progress. And some of the more interesting ones that we've worked on is where the thing that's being built is very, very large. So think like large aircraft, very big parts, wanting to be able to track all of these big metal parts with RFID tags. Same basic concepts apply as would with smaller part work in progress, but you get some different challenges as far as how far away you need to be able to read the size of the parts, the materials of the parts, the tags you use. But the ROI is insanely good because the cost of these parts is really, really high, but also the cost of making a mistake in the manufacturing process on these. Sometimes with planes, for example, you might take you might have two plates that go on a plane. And if you were to look at them, they look identical. But if you were to take out the calipers and measure, the holes on one might be 0.003 millimeters further to the right. You take that part, you weld it to a plane, you add 5 more parts on top of it, and then realize the holes don't line up. Now you have a huge problem. You have to take that all apart. The labor, the cost of the materials, the delay in the manufacturing process, the costs really add up quickly. So being able to add that extra layer of accuracy to the process is huge.
Yeah, most definitely. And one of the advantages RFID brings into that manufacturing space is not only the ability to track and identify items, but the ability to write to a tag or to combine a tag with another tag, or in the case of aircraft, the ability to, on the maintenance side after the aircraft is delivered, if an air carrier or a military organization or a civilian organization, there are certain parts that have to be checked, inspected, or replaced at a certain amount of time of air hours. You can actually use the RFID tag to set those time frames and to know when it's time to replace a part, or to verify that a part had been replaced after that time had elapsed.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great point. I think across a lot of use cases that we see, we have a lot of customers coming to us today, not necessarily because they're starting from scratch, but they're seeing RFID tags coming through their environment. Maybe they're being tagged by the manufacturer as they are becoming more and more common. These secondary use cases, maybe it wasn't the reason the tag was put on the product, but you get a lot of these secondary and third level use cases that you can start attaching because now the tags exist and that part's already been handled in some cases.
Most definitely. And then like to shift that even discussion over onto the retail side, the other piece that comes in about the ability to kill a tag, deactivate a tag, or reactivate a tag, right? So let's take another process. So let's say a scrupulous customer goes into a store and they bypass the point of sale process altogether. So if that drill that Sam and I were talking about has that RFID inlay, and part of your process is to kill the tag after, or suspend or kill the tag after the product had been paid for, that person leaves, takes the product outside around those boundaries, then returns to a different store location and tries to return it. The service desk, when they go to scan that tag, will know that it wasn't deactivated and know that it was stolen, right? And then also on the return side, you could use that same process for legitimate sales. Bought the wrong item, bought the wrong size. I want to reinsert that item back into inventory so I could use that same RFID 9600 product that we have to re-enable, reactivate that tag to put it back on the store shelf.
All right. And our next panel question, and this is a question actually that we had gotten from our audience as well, is what is hybrid scanning and how is it different from traditional barcode scanning?
So the best way to look at that, so at the end of the day, a barcode and a RFID tag, it's a unique identifier, just like we have GS1, right, for the UPC. And basically, as far as the POS system is concerned, it's just looking for an item number, whether that's wireless via the RFID tag or whether that's scanning with a physical barcode. So basically, the great thing is, other than that verification that I spoke about, the systems are really already set up to take an item number, correct? So you can take it both ways, but the dual scanning has the ability to, one, do the verification. And the reason why we call it hybrid, because you can deploy and implement this product for traditional point of sale scanning. And then as soon as your back end, your software, your operations is ready to start supporting RFID on the use cases we just spoke about, it's just a matter of enabling that and reading that data into the inventory system. You already have the infrastructure deployed in place on all your point of sale systems ready to go.
And I would add to that, I think the other thing that's really beneficial of a hybrid approach is it really lowers the cost of entry. Because to your point, you can implement it early, you can activate it when you want, but also it doesn't have to be 100% across the board. You can have some high value items that have RFID tags, lower value items maybe are only barcode scanned. From a consumer perspective, in this use case, they don't notice a difference whatsoever as long as everything's going correctly and they're not trying to do something they're not supposed to do. So, lower cost of entry and also a quicker ROI looking at hybrid approaches where they make sense.
All right. And another question we have is why do you think RFID adoption is accelerating and what's changed?
I mean, I'll let you add in any color that you have, but I think there's a couple of key driving factors that we're seeing that are really kind of moving adoption. One is the tag costs have come down. I think that's a big factor. There used to be a barrier of entry to say, okay, an item had to be worth, $50, $100, $200 to make sense to put a tag on it. Recently, I noticed that, you're now seeing in Walmart's 45-cent boxes of crayons have RFID tags on them now, because the tags have gotten down to a level where it starts to make sense and the ROI is there. So that opens up the use cases pretty broadly. I think the technology as well, it's been around for a really long time, but it continues to improve year over year, the reliability. And then I also think you see some really big players who have invested heavily. I mentioned, Walmart's a great example of that. They've gone really heavy in the RFID route. So when you start seeing large organizations leading the path, it builds trust, but also they start to kind of build the playbooks that other people kind of come behind and start to follow.
Yeah, and I would second that. It's really at the point of manufacture. We've seen them almost like a hockey puck, the number of manufacturers in the supply chain that where RFID, say 5 years ago or longer, was kind of a one-off or kind of an emerging technology. Right now, we're seeing it more of an established technology because you're seeing it on so many products. You can go down to your local, automotive stores, sporting goods stores. I mean, I've lost track of the number of items that are being manufactured now. Even when I just recently did some work on one of my vehicles, the antifreeze, for example, that I bought from my local AutoZone had an RFID tag on the label. So it's there, and it's only a matter of time before pretty much every product is going to start utilizing it. Would it ever get down to the level that there would be a need to put it on, say, a pack of gum or something? We're talking sub-dollar items. I'd say probably not, but the tag price, to Sam's point, has gone down so dramatically. It's now cost justified to put those inlays on every item at the point of manufacture. It's no longer just a case level, box level, truck level solution. It's now truly an item level.
So with RFID adoption accelerating, I guess, what are the biggest integration pitfalls when adding RFID?
Yeah, I think RFID kind of follows the same general rules of any big project in my mind. And those are, your success rate is going to go down heavily if you don't have really clear goals as to what you're trying to accomplish. You need to know, really spend the time identifying your problem, and then you need to spend time identifying what the expected outcome is, and you need to work within the bounds of the technology. And so as long as you're taking all of those considerations into account, I think you're going to be very successful. There's actually a quote that I really like from Albert Einstein. It says, if I had 1 hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes on the solution. I think that's a really good approach to take, not just with RFID, but any big structural change that you're making to your business. Get those definitions in place, know your success criteria, know your timelines. For the customers that do that, and at DecisionPoint, we help customers with that, we see a high success rate on the projects. The ones that go in just kind of saying, hey, this is a cool technology, let's just see what it can do for my business, those ones are not going to be nearly as successful.
Yep, and I would agree. You have to have those parameters defined. As in the case with Lowe's, the main goal was and is loss prevention, and then involving ticket switching. But then it also moves into other areas, especially when we're talking to other retailers, where the phase 2, phase 3 of the project, they're looking for increasing their inventory accuracy, or in the case of the big box electronics store that we've probably all been to, right? One of their needs that they had, for example, was, hey, I've got a wall of big screen TVs. I need to localize or identify one specific TV with a specific serial number and a specific tag for customer pickup. So there's a lot of add-on use cases, but like I said, in the case of Lowe's, it's loss prevention is the big driving factor.
So how are companies quantifying ROI from RFID beyond labor savings?
I think that also highly depends on what problems they're trying to solve, what area they're in. But if you look at, say, distribution, for example, chargebacks can be a really big thing. Hey, I sent a whole truckload of things to my end customer. They claimed there were missing things when it got to them, and now they're charging me back for those missing items. So if I have a better record of what actually went on, say, the truck, I can avoid those chargebacks, or I can dispute them. That can be a huge amount of money for a lot of organizations. That's one thing. Accuracy is another one. I mentioned the plain, manufacturing. The cost of an accuracy error in manufacturing can be extremely high. So that's one other metric. I don't know, Philip, do you have some others that maybe you've run across besides those?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, accuracy is driving. I mentioned that's where some of the retailers are starting to move, and I know it does also go into efficiency. If I can scan stuff coming in on a dock, faster, or have the ability to localize and find products. That's really kind of some of the interesting use cases that we see. And then, outside of retail, we have, opportunities to where, say, waste collection is another example where they're tracking if an item's been picked up with an RFID tag on a can or a waste detector. They can have a mobile reader actually on a truck where it's automated with, like a robotic arm. And then they can find out, not only, hey, did I go to all of these places on my route, but how fast, how efficient, and how long did it take me to complete that route? So there's a lot of different metrics you can gather depending on when and how you deploy the tags.
Well, I think one other that applies to retail that comes to mind as well is, the cost of losing a sale.
Yes.
Talk about locating items. If you have items in stock, how many times have you personally, I know I've done this a number of times, you go into a store, the website says they have 3-4 items in stock. You can't find it. They can't find it in the back room. Nobody knows where it is. So now I'm going to leave and go shop somewhere else, or I'm going to go to Amazon and order it, and they've now lost that sale. So those losses add up as well. So there's a lot of different potential ROIs that you can go after with this technology.
All right, and then our last panel question today before we get into some of the Q&A from the audience. What's the future of RFID enabled scanning and what should companies be preparing for?
Yeah, so right now I was showing you one product, which here's the PowerScan product. As you can see, it looks like a traditional scanner. In fact, if I hold up the scanner, this is pretty much identical to the one you'd see at a Home Depot, but it would be orange. You hold the two products side by side, they look exactly the same, right? So this is one use case right at the point of sale or at the back of the dock door. But now also you're going to see other things, products like presentation capabilities where you can have multiple RFID read points, either at a PC or a point of sale or a dock door. And Sam had mentioned about locating the items. So if I take my, in-store communication device, like this EDA, PDA type product, I can now take it off an Estelle Associates, snap it onto a portable reader, and now I can use this to do a wide beam, long range item location capability. So there's multiple products and multiple use cases now. It's expanding where, like I said, it was like a one-off product in the past. You're going to see it pretty much be an every data collection product that is not going to be one solution or the other. It's going to be both, right? I think the PowerScan RFID is just the first of many hybrid products that are going to be hitting the market over the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I kind of look at it from two perspectives. If I look at the very near term, I think this acceleration that we're seeing of the number of items that are getting tagged, that's going to keep growing exponentially. I think you're going to start, and Philip called this out earlier, you're going to start seeing tags on almost every item. There may be some exceptions. Maybe it never gets down to the gum level, but you're going to see it get on the vast majority of items. And so that's going to open up a lot of business use cases. If I look even further out, I think one of the areas that I find personally really interesting is there's some companies that are working towards making RFID more accessible to the consumer themselves. So having some RFID adjacent technologies around the phone. Now, this is all still fairly early in my opinion, but let's imagine we fast forward 5 or 10 years from now and Apple or Samsung releases a phone with RFID capabilities in it. Just like we can now all scan barcodes with the camera on our phone. Nobody really cared about barcodes in their day-to-day life. It was just for the business level. Now we're using barcodes all the time. So if you start opening up some level of RFID capability to the consumer, I think that's going to open up entire industries of different things that you can do with the technology targeted towards the consumer.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Sam, to bring up. So actually, I've actually got one device here in front of me. This is a standard, looks like a smartphone style, PDA type product that we manufacture. This one does have the built-in short range 900 megahertz RFID built in onto the chipset. And organizations, companies, chip manufacturers such as Qualcomm, for example, their newest architecture that they integrated, it will include RFID capability for a short read range of 900 megahertz in the actual architecture. And then it'll be up to the device manufacturers, whether that be consumer or rugged, to implement, put inlays in there, but it's going to be standard as part of that architecture for future phone EDA products here within the next, it's starting now, and it's only, to your point, Sam, going to accelerate over the next 12 and 24 months.
Yeah, and so it opens up a lot of interesting possibilities. I know one of the other things we talk about is like digital passports. Philip talked earlier about making sure that your designer clothes or handbags are authentic. A lot of companies are putting a lot of work into building this digital trail from manufacturer to the consumer. Access to that at one level might be through the barcode, but if you open up the ability to start scanning the RFID, it gives the consumer another level of validation that their product is real, because it is much harder to fake an RFID tag than it is to fake a barcode.
Yeah. And RFID tags can be encrypted. So there's security mechanisms that you can implement in an RFID that you can't easily do, especially on a traditional 1D barcode or even a 2D barcode. You're limited. So, again, for that kind of verification that I'm getting the product that I purchased, RFID is the better solution going forward.
I will say, though, I draw the line. If anybody starts making me scan an RFID tag to pull up a menu at the restaurant, I still fight the barcodes. I want the paper menu back, but maybe that's just me.
All right, so we're going to start getting into some of our audience questions. And thank you to everyone who submitted questions before the webinar through the webinar registration page. We have a lot of questions to get to, so we're going to try to get through as many as possible, but we might not be able to get through everybody's questions. We're going to give you the contact information for our speakers today, so you guys can reach out to them if you have any other questions for them. So starting off with our registrant questions, how is RFID working to expand on its existing legacy, but in new use cases?
I mean, I think a lot of what we've covered today is a lot of new stuff. I mean, RFID's been around for a long time, but I think as we're seeing more tags, we're seeing more use cases. And I think it used to more primarily be in very rugged industrial spaces, maybe more manufacturing, maybe some a little bit in warehousing, but we're starting to see it come more front of store. Retail's kind of become the focus of it. And I think a lot of that is, relatively new.
Yeah, I would agree. And RFID, we see it across vertical, and we say retail. So another area of retail, we're seeing an uptick or more adoption of our RFID is like, say, for tires for your vehicle. So they're starting to put RFID tags at the point of manufacture, and they can utilize that RFID tag to track when they install the tire on your vehicle, when you rotate your tires. It opens up a lot of possibilities from a retail and return customer standpoint, right? When you kind of have some metrics that you can measure after the sale due to the RFID tag.
All right, and then our next question. Given that RFID implementation typically involves a higher upfront cost than barcode systems, what are the motivational factors for its implementation?
Yeah, I think this comes back to one of the talking points we had earlier, which is really clearly defining the problem. And I think part of that is what is the cost of that problem to you. I'll be the first to say not every opportunity is the right one for RFID. So what we generally do at DecisionPoint is we'll sit down with the customer, we'll go through and do an ROI analysis with them and help them understand how long it's going to take for them to get to it. And if it doesn't make sense, we'll be the first ones to let you know, hey, maybe this isn't the right technology for this particular problem, and maybe let's look at some other ones. But largely, it tends to be a pretty good fit, and customers are fairly educated and probably done a little research and already know that it's a fairly good fit. So it's just a matter of understanding how they're going to quantify it. I think one of the problems we can run into with customers sometimes is they know it's a problem, they know that the technology can fix it, but they don't understand or can't quantify the cost of the problem. And so they can't really get to an ROI. So I'd spend a little more time figuring out how do we quantify what this is really worth to you, and then we can make sure that this technology is going to make sense.
Yeah, I agree. And when you get in, and it's going to vary by market to market. So we also have opportunities we're working with on the healthcare side so that ties into, hey, I want to verify that the insulin I'm getting is legitimate insulin, that it's not something from a third party somewhere else. There's a safety aspect of it, the quantity, doing inventory right in a pharmacy. So even the retail pharmacies are starting to look at implementing RFID for real-time inventory and verification that the medications are correct. And also I could be a little more proactive on expired medications. So that's just kind of one unique use case, but and again, it goes cross industry, right? Inside, outside of retail, healthcare, manufacturing, transportation, logistics. I can record delivery information when something's delivered. Obviously, the most common one, probably that you're unaware RFID is being used, is as a lot of airports now are like, for example, are starting to implement, like Vegas in particular, they use RFID bag tags. And we've got more and more airlines that are looking at the advantages of not having just a printed barcode, but an inlay for tracking your bag and also routing it to which plane or destination it needs to go. So again, it's going to vary from market to market and use case to use case.
Yeah. Well, and one other thing comes to mind too that I would add to that as well is this is where it's important to consult with somebody that really knows RFID, is that what you have in your head may not be what is actually necessary to get the ROI that you're looking for. So some people may go immediately to, hey, I need readers all over the ceilings in the facility. I need to know everywhere that this item goes within a few feet or a few meters. But when you really dig into the problem, it's like, well, no, actually, you only need to know if it's moving from this section of the facility to another section, or you need to know when it's coming into the facility or out of the facility. So rather than installing a really, really expensive infrastructure to do real-time locationing, maybe you only need a few portals in key areas so that you can understand the movements from one area to another or on or off of a truck. So sometimes there are ways to kind of pare down the requirements, but still get to the end goal, and it makes that ROI calculation come out a lot better.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll give you an example of that. So the tool rental, you can go to your local Home Depot, your Lowe's, you can rent tools. What they want to be able to use their RFID tag is have a hardened tag if I'm renting, some sort of heavy equipment that I'm, building a home, working on a house, whatever the case may be, right? You don't need infrastructure and everything lit up with RFID, but if you could actually scan that at the point of sale or the point of delivery, you have that traceability and tracking that, hey, Philip has rented that item and it's going to be gone for X amount of days. And then you could take that a step further and you could actually put a portal on the entrance and exit to a gated area. So you could actually not only track it at the rental process, but track when the item or asset leaves the facility and comes back to the facility. So again, the early days, everybody thought we had to put reader and portal points everywhere. And really you just have to be strategic on where you actually need that type of coverage, because we're not trying to replace Wi-Fi with RFID. And the customers that have tried to do that in the past, the business models just fell apart and it's been cost prohibitive.
All right. And then another question we had from our audience is, how can businesses ensure that 100% of RFID tags are successfully read during scanning processes, especially in high volume or complex environments?
I'm actually really glad that somebody asked this question. I have maybe a slightly controversial take, and that is, I think first we need to reset our expectations. The reality is that RFID is, and really any wireless technology is not 100%. Now, it's not uncommon, depending on the use case, the materials, the tags, there's a lot of variables. We can get into 98, sometimes 99%. But one of the first conversations I have with customers is that if you're telling me that 100% is what's required, it's a showstopper if you can't get it, then you just need to realize that you're not going to get that with a single scan. The way that you get to 100% is you have to have very clear exception scenarios. So if I have 99 products that pass a reader and it catches all of those just fine, and then one doesn't, then what's the exception scenario? Do you just take it through another time to see if you get a read? Do you take it to another type of scanner that's a little bit stronger, or like an enclosed scanner, and do an additional scan? So as long as you have clear exception procedures in place, you can get to those higher level of accuracy. But if you're just expecting that you're going to throw a bunch of RFID tags past an RFID reader and get 100% all the time, that's not a realistic expectation. The other thing I also, consult with my customers about is, okay, how much of this tracking are you getting today? Odds are it's near zero. So are you telling me there's no value in getting 99.5% of this data versus 100? And oftentimes you can reframe it and they understand, and you definitely can get to an ROI. So whether it's by adding an exception handling procedures or just resetting expectations, don't get stuck on that 100% number, because that will trip you up.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add to that is there are mechanisms that you can put in place. So we talk specifically point of sale, right? You can have it to where if the system knows, as the use case we gave for Lowe's, like with a drill, that it's supposed to read both a UPC and an EPC, and for whatever reason the scanner doesn't read the EPC, you can have the system suspend the transaction, right, until it does read, right? So you can kind of put a gate to kind of prevent that from going to the next process, suspending the sale, not allowing the customer to pay. And then on top of that, a lot of retailers now are replacing the legacy EAS, the magnetic technology that you see in the stores, the portals. They're moving those over to RFID. So that's another, transition point or portal that's being implemented on the entrances and exits of stores, in addition to the point of sale process where you can suspend the transaction. So to Sam's point, there's different and cost-effective ways you can increase that read rate and reliability, right, to really achieve your objective.
Yeah, those are great examples those are built-in exception scenarios. It's still automated. It doesn't require a lot of extra labor, but it catches the off chance that it doesn't read and makes sure that it directs things in the right direction.
All right, and then another question that we have is there a growing trend toward incorporating printed 2D barcodes on RFID labels in logistics and supply chain applications? And is it more effective to use them in combination rather than choosing one over the other?
Yeah, the way that I look at that is, you have to consider you're touching a product and using RFID, but is everybody that's going to be touching that product going to be using RFID? If not, there's still a need to have human readable. There's a need to have barcode data on there because it could be other parts within your own process requires a scan versus an RFID read. It could be other people that are handling that product. So I'd say yes, I think it's becoming pretty common. I think the other thing that's driving that is that we're getting more availability and lower cost of printers that are capable of doing both. So it's really easy now to go out and get a printer that can print human readable, barcode, and encode the data all in one shot. And so that really lowers the barrier of entry there.
Yeah. And not only is it just in high performance, fast, large volume industrial printers, but they're small desktop capability printers now, as well as mobile and portable printers. So even from one of the use cases of one of the retailers is talking about is using a mobile printer to generate an RFID enabled markdown tag or label to go on top of a product. And I'll give you an example. You go on a Home Depot, they have a tendency to put those yellow markdown tags on items that have gone, they're seasonal items and it's gone past 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and they keep lowering the price. So a lot of retailers that are thinking along the lines is, hey, we could have the ability to also RFID enable those markdown tags with a portable printer. So that's there, or it's actually emerging, and we're hearing more and more talk about that.
Let's see what other questions we have. How do you view the food RFID tagging timeline over the next 12 months?
So I think that one's an interesting one because if you'd asked me 12 months ago, I might have had a slightly different answer. So there's been a lot of different initiatives, such as FSMA, that the dates keep changing. And so there was a big push to do that. And I think people still have their eye on it, but the dates keep moving. So I think it's going to take people a little while to get there. I think there's still a priority. Some companies are going to be early adopters and are going to go full bore, but I'm also seeing a lot of companies kind of sitting back and saying, well, I'm going to let these other people figure it all out, and then maybe I'll jump in the pool.
Yeah, and the technology even on the tag itself is changing. So you think of, there's ceramic tags that are batteryless, and the ability to kind of tie into, temperature monitoring and fluid levels and those sorts of things. So, we're seeing more interest, right, in adopting that technology, especially on food supply safety. I mean, there are processes and procedures in place today, right? If you go to your local Kroger store, you buy something and there's a recall for listeria or something like that. Right now, the system's limited to, if you have a loyalty card, they will actually send you an email and let you know that the item's been recalled. But it would be nice if we could build some more active in the system, not with the tags, right at the point of sale, to kind of, push that information down to the consumer to present sickness, illness, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think the technology, it is the perfect fit for the use case. The goal here is you want to be able to track the full supply chain of food. You want to be able to identify potential threats and notify consumers, to your point. It's the right technology for it. I hope that adoption will continue and maybe speed up, but I do think that it's going to go at kind of a slow pace unless more pressure is put on companies to implement quicker.
And our next question is, can the hybrid scanning device be configured for a hybrid capture workflow? Specifically, can we trigger both an RFID read and a 2D barcode scan with a single button press? And how is that combined data parsed and presented to the user on screen to avoid confusion?
So typically it's going to be transparent to the user. That's something that's going to be done on the back end. You really want those back end processes to kind of do that verification. You don't want to put any more workload or capability onto the user. But the short answer is yes. So that, like I said, not only can it do read the EPC and the UPC at the same time on a single trigger pull, but if I hold the button down, right, it can also take a digital image of what I'm scanning. So I'm actually getting 3 pieces of data that are going into the system, and it's really up to the back end system to determine what you do with that data, not necessarily the cashier or the worker, but more so the back end. How does it need to be alerted? How does it need to be parsed? But it's basically 2 sets of, one wireless and wired item number and the 1 digital image of the transaction.
And I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that from a user perspective, they probably just either get the continue with your transaction or an associate's been called to help you. Like
Right,
that's
right.
probably the only real feedback that they're going to get.
That's right. And yeah, I mean, could they technically get feedback on the display? Yes, that could be programmed in there. They can get feedback on the LEDs that are in there by the color of the LED. You can tell what it's scanning, if it's scanning both single or one. So we do provide forms of feedback that are quick and easy without someone having to be a technologist, right, at the point of sale. So,
You just
but
need
yes.
you just need one line that says run with an exclamation.
And then the next question we have here is, if we are implementing RFID without any prior RFID experience on our IT team, can we get help?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll take this one. So I would strongly recommend that people don't try to implement RFID 100% on their own. I don't want to make it sound like the technology is too complicated to implement, but it is complicated enough that you want somebody who knows what they're doing and has done many implementations before. So shameless plug here, my company, DecisionPoint Technologies, we do this all the time. We take a very consultative approach where we can come in. Well, first we'll start by talking through your problem, identifying if it's a good fit for RFID. We can come and do a site survey, put together our recommendations for how it should go, set up the testing, the ROI assessment, trial it, and then go live. So we can help you through all of that. We can help you with the tag selection, the hardware selection, doing services 100%. Now, if there's pieces, sometimes we have customers that want to take pieces of that in-house. We can certainly work with people to do that. But my preference would be, feel free to reach out to me if you're interested. But if you're not reaching out to us, I would definitely encourage you to get somebody involved who knows what they're doing to help you map this out. Your success rate is going to be much, much higher.
Yeah, and I would agree. Kudos to DecisionPoint. I mean, you really need, not just a vendor, but a partner, right? Such as Sam, to be in there in that consultative role to ease that pain, to help you with that lift. And then we, as Datalogic, as a manufacturer, we are an extension to Sam, right? So we're responsible for providing the hardware, providing the SDKs, answering the technical questions that may come up if something new had popped up on a use case on how to use the product. But at the end of the day, you truly need an organization like Sam with a DecisionPoint to kind of guide you, again, ease that implementation process. You'll be happier in the end, and more, most likely more than not, you'll also lower the cost of implementation by having that guiding force when you go to implement the solution.
We have two more questions that have been asked a couple of times that we're going to get through before we end this. One is, can I measure temperature with RFID? And then the other one is, when do you need RFID portals and RFID portable readers, and when does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it is interesting. There are a number of really interesting tags that are starting to come out to the market that can do things like temperature sensing. Some of them can actually take the energy from the reader to do kind of a one-time temperature read and report that data back. There's others that, are RFID and then also maybe have a battery attached. And then there's also some interesting ones that, may change the value depending. It's more of like if it passes a certain threshold, it's either going to read, hey, it never passed this threshold, or it did pass this threshold. So I guess the short answer is yes, there are temperature sensing technologies, and we're seeing a lot more of those use cases come up.
So we were unable to get through all of these questions, but like I said at the beginning of the Q&A, we're going to send out the information for both speakers. So if you have more questions for them or you didn't get your questions answered, you can reach out to them directly. I wanted to thank Sam and Philip for sending today. And thank you everyone for all of your great questions.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.